I think that you can do it by putting boundaries in place. I'm also not great with boundaries as a type A person, but you have to learn how to say yes to the things that really matter and have the backbone and strength to say no and stand by your no's.
Hey everyone, welcome. It's Melanie Johnson. We're here with another great podcast for you. So, I have this incredible superwoman with us today, Kash Rocheleau. She is like running multiple companies in the C suite. I don't know how she's doing it. We were talking a little bit in the green room. We were saying coffee, wine, and Jesus for sure. So, we're going to get some insight on a woman who is far exceeding regular expectations of what you can do and what you can achieve. And let's get some inside scoop of how do you do this all and how are the things that she's keying into that we can do in our own lives, whether it's running a family or running a business that we can key into today. So Kash, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Happy Good Friday.
Yeah, happy Good Friday. So my audio is a little delayed. I don't know what is causing that, but sometimes it just happens. So anyways, tell us a little bit about your background, how you got started in business and being where you are today.
Yeah. So my bachelor's is in business, just general business. I was a college athlete, so business seemed to be the route that a lot of athletes take because you can get by easily. Classes are semi easy, juggling it all. But my real passion growing up was to be a wife and a mom. I don't know what was the driver for that, but when I married my husband shortly after college, we had some infertility having kids. We had my first after 5 miscarriages, and it kind of exacerbated that desire to stay home. And I was awarded that luxury. And about 7 months in, I was so miserable, not the mom part of it. Just I felt like I had no purpose. I'm a very type A driven personality that needs a to-do list, really. And I was building resentment because my husband would go to work and communicate with adults all day, and I was communicating with this tiny human that couldn't really communicate. And he
Yeah.
would come home and I would be ready to communicate with an adult, have some interaction with a human that could, suffice that type of interaction that I
Yeah.
needed. And I finally just blew a gasket for no reason and said, I need to go back to work. I don't know what I'm going to do. And of course, he was like, great. I don't know what you're waiting for. And so I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I found a post for an executive assistant to a CFO. And my initial thought was, how hard could it be to wrangle, a financial department and their needs? I'm doing it at home. And I just took the leap of faith. And I learned so much in the finance side of things, how to read P&Ls, how to read balance sheets, how to do cost analysis. And I was also in the food industry, which is something to love. If those people that are in the food industry tend to love it. And I've grown through the business and the industry from there. Shortly after I started, the CFO at the time needed to go back to Hawaii for some family issues, and we weren't set up to be remote.
Mhm.
And we also weren't really in a position to hire another CFO. And so she went to the founder CEO and said, Cash could do this. I look back and I
Were you
laugh.
scared?
Of
Were you
course I
scared when
was.
you did
I
that?
was very scared. I look back and laugh because I don't know where the faith was in her for her to advocate for me like that. But also just the personality that I have. I'm very much we're going to do this sink or swim. And my initial thoughts were, when are you ever going to have an opportunity like this again? Whether you fail miserably,
Mhm.
when are you ever going to be awarded an opportunity like this? So I took it and I really treated my entire career like that. I've been awarded some amazing opportunities and I really faced them with, when are you going to get another opportunity like this? Face it and fail, face it and succeed, but don't pass up an opportunity that you might regret.
Yeah. And now you've been in the food industry for a while.
Mhm.
I love that you're saying, it seems to me like listening to you that you learned so much more on the job
Yeah,
than you did at school. You
I
dove
d
in, like school was kind of like, okay, I got to mature, but it was a big
yeah.
difference, right?
I absolutely. When that CFO decided that she was gonna step away to go back to her family, I decided to go back and get my master's in accounting and finance in tandem with running this finance department. And the schooling was great for the reasons that you mentioned. It certainly helped with maturity. It helped with the technicality, but
Yeah,
the on the job training was really the most beneficial. And again, like that feeling of sink or swim, being thrown into an ocean, you can learn how to paddle, but when you're thrown into an ocean, you're going to learn a
yeah.
lot faster.
You sure are. I mean, I developed TV stations. I knew I was a TV anchor and then all of a sudden was part owner in a TV
Mhm.
station building it from scratch. And you're like, I don't have any idea, but you just figure it out one day at a time of how do you do it. And I know there's so many moms out there that feel the same way that you did,
Mhm.
that you want all your life to be a mom. And then I tell people, even with one baby, you're really not that busy, especially when they're infants because they're sleeping so much. And you're like, and if you're an ambitious person or you say type A, it's
Mhm.
hard to get your mind wrapped around that and you can get into kind of a dark place. Talk to that a little bit about, not being afraid to do that. So many moms are like, I don't know what they do and they struggle with should I or shouldn't I? Do I feel bad? And, how did it work for you having that transition?
It was definitely difficult, but it was difficult more internally because, as much as I can glow or have people glow over my success, it's really the people around me that should get the credit because I couldn't do that. My husband was a huge support in you have to do what makes you happy. If you are not happy being at home, being the housemaker, then let's find something that makes you happy. But I think internally for me, it was is my son going to grow up thinking that work was more important or that I didn't care about him or all of the mom guilt? I say that because I kind of joked about it before I had kids. I was very naive.
Yeah.
And they're true feelings. You struggle with, how do I give to my work to the fullest? How do I give to my son to the fullest? How do I give to my husband to the fullest?
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, I'm a journaler. So I spent a lot of time journaling in the pros and cons. And,
Yeah.
what we only get our kids for 18 years, right? And it seems like a long time, but I'm more than halfway through parenting my first. And it's gone by so fast. And my biggest regret would have been if I lived this 18 years, really suppressed who I was, my desires, and really had very soft skills and tried to jump back in. And so it felt like a very selfish decision to do it. But I think that you can do it by putting boundaries in place. I'm also not great with boundaries as a type A person, but you have to learn how to say yes to the things that really matter and have the backbone and strength to say no and stand by your no's. And those are difficult. There's meetings that I have to say no to or have them rescheduled to ensure that I make it to the soccer game that's important to my
Right.
son. As my kids have grown up, we've kind of gotten into a routine of, Saturday or Sunday night sitting down and asking, what is most important to you this week? I can't be at everything. What is
Yeah.
going to be the most important to you? And, sometimes it's just being there to brush their teeth and read them a book at night. And sometimes it's being at a big event. But I think communicating with those around you and having an immense support system to, be your sounding board and grounding in those times of struggle internally.
That's great that you have that communication. I think that's so important with your family and at work too, right? Is having those conversations of what's important to you. So you guys are aligned
Mhm.
because others, you can't read their mind. You can just show up at something and they're like,
Mhm.
"Pff, you thought that was great. And you jump through hoops to get to this baseball game or whatever it was. And then they're upset because you didn't read them a book that night. Then the
Exactly.
baseball game didn't even count. It's kind of makes me think about the five languages of love
Mhm.
where it's like what is important to that person, what aligns for them that's important. All
Yep.
right, I just don't know how you're running being a CFO of 3 companies. Explain to me how you do that.
Again, with a lot of coffee, wine, and Jesus. So the CFO role for Icon Foods, I was the CFO for almost 7 years before I stepped over into the CEO role. We
Yeah.
also didn't fill that CFO role, so I still just oversee the financials. I have a phenomenal controller that really runs the day to day, and I'm just the
Yeah.
check and balance when it's
Mhm.
necessary. So that one I that's a light pass on my resume. My husband and I own a small business here in St. George that really takes up about 10 minutes of my time on a monthly basis. Again, it's really just the overview. My husband is running the day to day of it. And Geigon Keto is a small entity that I would call it a parent company to Icon Foods. It's
Yeah.
a low to no sugar condiment business. So we actually provide the raws to that company and then sell the finished good to a distributor that gets it into retailers. So a lot of
Yeah.
what I do is separate companies that are very much intertwined with one another. But my main focus, time spent, is running Icon Foods.
Okay. So I want to ask you, as an athlete, as a mom, as a business owner, or business entrepreneur and C-suite in the food industry, a lot of stuff is going on in the food industry right now. Red dye, seed oils, all these preservatives, and the whole conversation has shifted. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I wish we had like hours.
Yeah.
We're taking it day by day. So we work in the clean label sugar reduction space. Seed oils don't really pertain to us much. I think that the administration coming in is going to help in a lot of ways. RFK is very big on reduced sugar, transparency and labels, children health, school lunch program. I think that those are all really great things that are going to help. But in the food industry, nothing happens quickly. And this administration wants to move a lot quicker than the industry is able to or wants to. I think that the want sometimes should be pushed a little bit harder than it is. But I think that a lot of consumers don't understand that, packaging, right? If a company is going to
Yeah.
change ingredients, they have to then change their packaging. And there's a lead time to that, right? You got to run that through your compliance. You've got to run that through,
Yeah.
marketing to make sure dye lines are correct. And then your manufacturer that runs that packaging usually has a 4 to 10 week lead time. And your
Yeah.
MOQs on packaging can be upwards of 10,000 units, right? And when you start to think about that and the timeline it takes to reformulate something, it could take upwards of 6 months. And so I think that what they're doing is really great. I think that the cadence that they're wanting to move is a little fast than is feasible for companies in the space.
Yeah, they're almost assuming we'll just throw out the old packaging and just start with new packaging.
Right.
How long does it take to formulate? Like they're thinking, oh, it should be a 30-day turnaround and just take the loss, eat the loss on all the old packaging and
Right.
everything you've got in the distribution line. And a lot of companies can't afford to do that.
Hmm.
They need to weed through everything else.
Yeah.
But it's almost like an urgent thing if you want. I'm seeing more things coming to market that are different, with,
Mhm.
oh, it's with avocado oil or less sugar or no high fructose corn syrup and things like that.
Yeah.
So I am seeing those rolling out as I'm going to the store.
Mhm.
But maybe it's even easier to start with something new than it is to change what the existing thing is. What do you think about that? Is it easier to roll out a new one, or it's kind of the same formula? It's like the same
Yeah.
candy or same whatever, but now we've made it a different way and then we can phase out the other one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's also still challenges in that because you have a commercialization phase, right? So we have
Yeah.
ideas. A lot of companies have 10,000 ideas, and really three of them get to shelves where consumers see them. And again, in that you've got R&D phase. When you're using different ingredients, there's challenges, right? They interact differently. You may off notes with one. You may need to mask something. And again,
Yeah.
the packaging side of things. I would say that it's probably going to be about the same timeline to bring something new to
Mhm.
market as it is to reformulate. But the challenge that we're seeing now is tariffs, right? And so you're seeing a lot of slowdown in ideation and commercialization because there's companies that are not sure what those costs are going to be.
Yeah.
Very unpopular opinion, but my opinion is whatever we're going to do with the tariffs, I kind of wish we would just do that so that companies can start strategizing on
Yeah.
what they're going to do. But right now, you're seeing a lot of halting in anything because companies just don't want to bring something to market that could 3x in cost
Yeah.
tomorrow. And one of the other challenges is that retailers really set the price. And so if COGS are fluctuating, the retailers are still saying, we're going to sell it for $2. If you want to make money on it, you're going to have to figure out how to be under that $2 threshold. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of volatility and just the halting ideation and commercialization is frustrating in our industry because there's a lot of great things happening behind the scenes, but likely will not get commercialized.
So we might be almost a year away from seeing what's going to happen
We could
and getting some good stuff to the marketplace. It could be.
100%.
So, as a CFO, give us some tips on if I'm running a company or I'm a small business owner, what are some things that I should be doing as a CFO that you see that a lot of people don't do?
Yeah. You know, my biggest one in a lot of conversations is the bottom line, right? I've heard a lot of CEOs really wanting to drive revenue over the last couple years. And my take on that is if you're a $30 million business, but you have zero EBITDA, you have no net profit versus a $3 million company that maybe has $500,000 in EBITDA, I'm
Mhm.
going to look at that 500 that or that $3 million company because I'm going to get some sort of ROI on it. But I would say the biggest challenges over the last 4 years, CEOs and founders especially, really driving for a higher revenue. And I would say that COVID also inflated a lot of mergers and acquisitions. And we saw some, wonderfully high transactions happen, but they also weren't super realistic. So I would say congratulations to those founders that were able to exit with a high multiple, but it
Yeah.
also kind of created some volatility with companies that want to eventually get to a transaction and sell multiples of 11, 12, 15x that just weren't
Yeah.
realistic.
Yeah. It was kind of like watches went up, cars went up all during COVID. You saw this spike in all these things, and then it all came crashing down. You know?
100%. I mean, what goes up must come down. We're starting to see a little bit more of some natural sized transactions, but there's still high expectations and some higher multiples that I think are reasonable within our industry.
Yeah, it's just been, it's all about the hype. If something
Mhm.
starts to get hyped and everybody jumps on the hype and they want to get on the hype. And I think that younger audience too thinks the hype's going to last forever, and it doesn't. My
Yeah.
oldest son kind of had that lesson with both cars and Rolexes and
Mhm.
things like that, where it's like, I lost $10,000 on
Yeah.
this watch. From I'm like, yeah, it's a hard lesson, but then you learn it
Yeah,
one way or another. You learn it.
you do.
Thanks for being on the show today. Tell people where they can find you, Cash.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn at Kash Rocheleau. You can also find me on our website, iconfoods.com. Those are the best places to connect.
Terrific. And anybody, if you're looking to write a book and become a best-selling author, reach out to us at eliteonlinepublishing.com. We help authors from just a thought in their head all the way to the book writing process and publishing process to be an award-winning international bestseller and use your book to grow your business. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye. Hey, are you looking to increase your revenue, build credibility, and elevate your brand? This podcast is brought to you by Elite Online Publishing, an innovative publishing and full spectrum marketing company. They will publish and market your book to make it a #1 bestseller. Becoming an author is the best way to market your business. So contact them at eliteonlinepublishing.com today. All of their authors become #1 bestsellers.